Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my full Game of Thrones Night of the Seven Kingdoms Episode 1 video. There are a whole bunch of Easter eggs and references to both Game of Thrones, the original main series, and to House of the Dragon because of the way this all fits in the timeline, so we will break it all down, and I will be doing episode videos for the entire season. Be sure to subscribe if you're brand new to the channel. Everybody grab your tournament gear. It's time for a proper tournament arc in Game of Thrones. The title of Episode 1 is The Hedge Knight. It's a reference to both the title of the novella that it's adapting from the Tales of Duncan Egg. The entire series, across all the different seasons that they do, will be adapted from George R. R. Martin's Tales of Duncan Egg. The collected works are referred to as A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, which they're using for the title of the series now. But the title of Book 1 is The Hedge Knight. Within the context of the actual story, it's a reference to both Sir Duncan the Tall and Sir Arlen of Pennytree, his original master. Within the world of Westeros and Game of Thrones, a hedge knight is a wandering knight without a master. Landed knights are the ones that you see working for lords at castles. In comparison, hedge knights travel the length and breadth of the Seven Kingdoms looking for gainful employment, basically a wandering knight who just goes from different lord to lord looking for temporary work before he goes on to the next lord. But the reason why people in the world of Westeros call them hedge knights, specifically like why the word hedge, is because most of their worldly wealth is in their arms, like they're very poor generally compared to regular knights, and generally they have to sleep outdoors, often under a hedge. So a lot of small folk and lords use it as a derogatory term when talking about hedge knights, as to call them lesser forms of knights in the Seven Kingdoms compared to landed knights or even the Kingsguard, who are meant to be the best of the best knights. Just to explain where this show fits in the timeline of House of the Dragon and the original Game of Thrones series, it's basically right smack dab in the middle between those two shows. It's about 78 years after the end of House of the Dragon, and it's 89 years before Game of Thrones Episode 1. Even though that is a very long time, there are a couple characters who are still alive from this period on Night of the Seven Kingdoms during the original Game of Thrones series. They're just extremely old. We'll talk about them as we go along through the episodes. Some of them might eventually actually appear on the show. The series also takes place about 13 years after the first Blackfyre Rebellion, so you have to remember that in the realm right now, just the vibe of everything amongst the small folk in the realm is that they've been through two very brutal civil wars based on the Targaryen family. But at the moment, Daeron II is still the reigning king, and he is a relatively popular king, but there have been many changes in the Targaryen family since the events of House of the Dragon to maintain its hold on Westeros, and just generally the state of things, because during this period in Westeros, the last dragon has already long since died. So one of the big questions that the show answers is how does the Targaryen family maintain its control of Westeros if they don't have the threat of dragons to hold over everyone? And speaking of Blackfyre Rebellion, I know I used my Blackfyre sword. It's a book-accurate version of Blackfyre that I was holding up at the beginning of the video. The Targaryens no longer have that in their possession, the reigning Targaryens. That was taken with the Blackfyre Pretenders that then escaped to form the Golden Company after the Blackfyre Rebellions. So neither one of the swords that I have right now, Longclaw, as it was wielded by Jon Snow with his special hilt, and Blackfyre, actually exist in that form on the show right now. But there are still a number of Valyrian weapons, Valyrian swords, that people around the realm have during this period. Dunk, however, is not one of them. He is dirt poor, and a lot of the series is based on him dealing with that fact, being dirt poor, and still trying to accomplish all of his goals. The episode starts just like the Hedge Knight book starts, and a lot of the actual episode, it just rips the page right onto the screen, like they say exactly what the characters say in the book. It's one of the most book-accurate adaptations so far, next to the early seasons of the original Game of Thrones series.
Was the inn boy ate the widow woman's pie? Not me.
This is also why George R. R. Martin has been hyping it up so much, because it is so much more book accurate than, say, like House of the Dragon, which he's been complaining about Season 2 and Season 3 of that show so far. But the episode starts with him burying Sir Arlen of Pennytree, who he'd been squired to since he was a boy, basically raised him to eventually, hopefully, become a knight. There are a couple funny references to that in whether or not Sir Arlen actually did knight him, or if Duncan is trying to lie his way into the tourney. We'll get to that in a second, too. Even though there are many flashbacks that we get to Sir Arlen when he was alive and when Dunk was younger, the show never actually picks a side, and this is actually how George R. R. Martin wrote it in the books. He never outright confirms whether or not Dunk was lying about being knighted. But there have been a couple things that HBO has let out in their marketing that I think kind of leans in one particular direction that we'll talk about in a second when we get to that moment on the actual episode. But when he's eulogizing Sir Arlen as he's burying him in the ground, and we get those flashbacks, all those moments as dialogue are taken directly from the book. We see their 3 horses. It's Sweetfoot, Chestnut, and Thunder. Thunder is the one that Dunk rides. It's his horse. The other 2 were Sir Arlen's horses. The horses themselves are also important characters on the show, like Ghost is an important character to Jon Snow, so is Thunder, for instance, and the other horses to Dunk. Like we see Dunk later in the episode talking to Thunder, and the horse seemingly replying back to him as if it understands what he's saying. But after thinking about his prospects and what is going to be next for him in life, like what he could possibly do, he gets the idea that if he could win the tournament at Ashford, which they were headed to, Sir Arlen died on the way to the tournament because he was going to compete in it, because you have to be a knight to compete in the tournament. If Dunk can win the tournament, one of the great lords might take him into their house as a landed knight into his service, fulfilling his lifelong dream of becoming a knight. That is literally the only thing that Dunk wants in this world. He wants to be a knight, just like Brienne of Tarth during the main show. There'll be a lot of light Easter eggs and connections to Brienne of Tarth throughout the episodes because he's meant to be the ancestor of Brienne of Tarth. During A Song of Ice and Fire and during the events of Game of Thrones, Brienne of Tarth uses Dunk's coat of arms when she's traveling across Westeros to stay incognito instead of using the House Tarth sigil because Dunk's armor and his coat of arms wound up in her father's treasury on Tarth. So Brienne grew up knowing about Sir Duncan the Tall, who was one of the greatest knights in Westerosi history. Joffrey literally talks about him in the White Book. Eventually he becomes one of the Kingsguard, but obviously this show is meant to be his origins. How does he go from here, where you see him at the beginning of episode 1 with nothing to his name, to becoming one of the greatest knights in Westerosi history? So much so that there are 4 pages about him in the White Book. But his quest to become a knight, to embody the goodness and the honor that is to be a true knight, is a lot like Brienne during the events of the main series, so he's meant to feel very similar to Brienne. This is why there was an episode of Game of Thrones Season 8, one of the best episodes of Season 8, one of the only good episodes of Season 8, called A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, which shares the name of the collected Tales of Dunk and Egg because of the connection between their characters and because A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is part of the oath that you recite when you are knighted. We will actually hear a version of that on this show, truncated, but there will be a character that will get knighted later, so they'll recite the oath again during that. George R. Martin has also talked about this in the past too. He actually came up with the idea for Dunk's character while he was writing backstory and doing more research for Brienne during the events of Game of Thrones. George does this a lot, where he'll go off on tangents and create massive amounts of lore, like Fire and Blood, for instance, while he's doing research and creating more lore for his main A Song of Ice and Fire novels. That's basically how the Tales of Dunk and Egg were born. He started doing research and then fleshed it out into a bigger story, and eventually that turned into the Tales of Dunk and Egg because he wanted to write backstory about where Brienne got this armor from, where she was trying to disguise herself. It belonged to this Sir Duncan the Tall. Well, how did Sir Duncan the Tall get the armor in the first place? And you get this whole origin story with them.
King's Landing? Lannisport?
So you have to remember that George R. Martin didn't write a lot of this backstory for this character earlier in the timeline, like Egg here also, until later after he'd written a couple of the Song of Ice and Fire novels. After Dunk decides to go to the tourney at Ashford and try to win, he takes Sir Arlen's armor, but it's too small to fit him, which is why he's wearing a belt of rope, because there are literally no belts that could fit him. Takes his sword, his armor, and his horses. Just to explain where we are in Westeros here, Ashford is here towards the south, near the top of the Dornish Marches here, north of the Dornish Marches, but still in the Reach. House Ashford is a vassal house of the Tyrells. But remember, the really important thing here is that they never show you whether or not Sir Arlen actually verbally knighted him before he died, or even made a reference to motion that he might knight him at some point. That was actually a really funny moment too, where you get a moment later where he asks him point blank, "So you're going to turn me into a knight at some point?" And Sir Arlen literally says nothing, just spits out the other direction. We get that funny moment with a little bit of Ramin Djawadi's Game of Thrones music to make you think that they're going to reuse the theme song again, but then stopping it short with him literally taking a dump, just to show you some of the humor of the story. I'm sure that'll land all over the spectrum, you either kind of love this humor or you hate it. But I don't think this is the show saying that Ramin Djawadi is crap, they're not trying to crap on him literally, they're just having a little bit of fun. We get the title overlaid with the episode itself, and that is close as you get to an actual intro scene in probably one of the biggest changes from the other Game of Thrones related series, the original main series and House of the Dragon. There is no complicated, involved intro with a ton of its own Easter eggs. A lot of my House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones videos were like literally just breaking down the portion of the intro, zooming, enhancing, looking for all the different changes. Soon after, he arrives at the inn on the way to Ashford and meets Egg, the young boy, believing him to be the stable boy and the innkeeper's son, and asks him to take care of the horses, with a couple jokes here. Notice how precocious he is. That is because he is a very learned little boy, way more learned than a normal small folk might be. But a lot of the comedy of the series comes from Dunk just being very unassuming and not thinking that anybody is actually lying to him, like he just believes in the goodness of people, so people often take advantage of that, for good and for worse. So this is why he doesn't poke a lot of hole in what Egg is telling him. Their dialogue when they first meet is also right out of the book when they first meet. The man who's passed out inside the inn is Daeron Targaryen, Daeron the Drunken. He's the oldest son of Maekar Targaryen I, who's a little bit lower in the line of succession at the moment. He has many children himself too. At the moment in Westeros, there are many, many members of the Targaryen family inside the royal family, like many of them, but they still have no dragons. When he wakes up suddenly and says, "I dream of you," notice he has white Targaryen hair, he pays with a Targaryen stamped coin. They're the reigning house, so their symbol would be on all the coin that they have, of course. But the dream that Daeron is talking about is a dragon dream. He's meant to be like Helaena, and the reason why he's so drunken, like why it's so infamously drunken all the time, is because of the dragon dreams. He doesn't want to have them. He's trying to subdue them. You can't turn off dragon dreams, like they'll come no matter what, but you can actually mute them just a little bit. But the dream he's referring to is the dream he dreamed of Dunk's future, is both a reference to Dunk during this season encountering and dealing with the Targaryens at the tourney at Ashford. They also kind of use Tanzel Too Tall's play about the puppet dragon in the night as a metaphor for Dunk's journey during season 1. But I also think that Daeron's dragon dream is a bit of a reference to the end of Dunk's life in the tragedy at Summerhall. We can't talk too much about that until we know more about Egg's character, and there's going to be a big reveal with him in a couple episodes. We will just wait to talk about that until they reveal it in the episode. Like, we don't want to get too far ahead of the show.
Close your insolent mouth.
There are probably a number of you that are watching this video that have not read the original book. If you do want to read the Hedge Knight book for season 1, it's like a 2-hour read. It's extremely short, very breezy. You can literally read it in under a couple hours. But remember here in this moment, Dunk knows nothing of dragon dreams. He doesn't even know they exist or they're a thing. He doesn't recognize Daeron as one of the royals either. He just notices he looks kind of strange and then thinks nothing of it. Later, the scene of him catching Egg on Thunder playing a knight is also right out of the book. The scene of Egg clocking him instantly that he doesn't appear to be an actual knight as well, too. Notice, very precocious, he recognizes that he is not a knight because Egg has met all the great knights in the realm, which Dunk later makes fun of him for, like, have you met all the great knights? And the truth is, yes, he has actually literally met all the greatest knights. He asks to become his squire because Egg genuinely does want to become a knight someday. We can't really talk about Egg too much. He's definitely hiding a secret here. We will find out about that, like the show will reveal that in a couple episodes. But when he starts asking about Dunk's father, Dunk is a bastard that was born in Flea Bottom. He grew up in Flea Bottom until Sir Arlen found him and brought him into his service and made him his squire. But they never revealed, like George R. Martin has never revealed who Dunk's father actually was. He was probably either a lesser noble or a very wealthy merchant. We're going to get a couple more flashbacks that will show his mother in Flea Bottom, so we'll get a little bit more of child Dunk in Flea Bottom eventually. Then you notice that the coin that Dunk tosses Egg has the 7-pointed star stamped on it. This will also become important because of the metaphor of the faith of the 7 and the trial of 7 in later episodes this season. There are a couple other references to the 7 later in this episode too. Dunk then arrives the next morning at the tournament. Notice you can start spotting the banners of most of the familiar great houses we've seen in the House of the Dragon, the original Game of Thrones series. There'll be a couple new ones that we haven't seen on the other shows too, but most of the houses that are involved in this tournament you've seen in some form on one of the shows already. This is the symbol of House Ashford. Their motto is, "Our sun shines bright." The master of the games he meets with is Plumber the Steward, who has a little bit of fun with him. Love the bit about the nasty Ashford chair, like whatever you do, don't wind up in that nasty Ashford chair. He basically gives him the rules, as well as us, the audience, the rules for actually competing in a tournament of Westeros. So if you lose, then the winner can ransom your armor or your horse back to them. Either you have to pay for it, or he just gets to write off and keep it if you can't pay for it to get back. They have a couple of jokes about whether or not Sir Arlen actually did knight him. He reminds Dunk that he needs to have proper armor, and Sir Arlen's armor is too small to fit him, meaning that he's going to have to get new armor, which is going to be really expensive. And he's going to have to find another lord at the tournament. Doesn't have to be a great lord, just has to be a lord to vouch for him. And he gets the idea for Manfred Dondarrion because Sir Arlen actually worked for his father as a hedge knight a long time ago during a battle. Then we meet the Fossaways, Stefan Fossaway, who is a total crapbag, who's fighting his younger cousin Raymond Fossaway, who's his squire, and becomes one of Dunk's first friends. The reason why they make all the references to not being ripe, rotten to the core, is because their house sigil, the Fossaway house sigil, is a red apple. Dunk sets up camp nearby in the stream in the woods. Notice when he goes to speak with Lord Dondarrion again, he sees one of the girls dressed up like she's dead, implying that Lord Dondarrion or whichever men that they're currently about to see tonight are into that kind of kink. No kink shaming. We won't do any kink shaming here. Then later that night, he sees Tanzel Too-Tall's puppet show. She's a puppeteer from Dorne, very good puppeteer, and her play, if you listen to the words, are used as a metaphor for Dunk's quest. The whole idea is that it's a night, like a random night. This isn't meant to be an actual event from real-life Westerosi history she's depicting. It's just like a fictional night she created. But it's a night that's trying to kill a dragon, not subdue him or tame the dragon. And the whole idea is the dragon finds out the secret that the knight is keeping, then he'll be dead. And it's meant to be a metaphor for Dunk, who is hiding a secret. Maybe he might not be a real knight. Maybe he's lying about being a knight. And if the Targaryens learn about it, he will be dead.
Must keep a truth concealed.
I think this is the show leaning a little bit further into the territory that Dunk was not actually knighted, like without absolutely confirming it. Like it's still kind of a question, but it does feel like the show is kind of leaning in the direction that he was lying. There'll be a couple other famous stories about real-life Westerosi people that Tanzel does plays about later during these future episodes. He meets Raymond Fossaway again, and they strike up their friendship, lets him know that he wants to but can't compete in the tournament because he's only a squire to his cousin Stefan, but he would like to actually compete. This will be important for later. Then they go to Lionel Baratheon's pavilion, who's the current lord of Storm's End, which is massive because he's so wealthy. He's one of the most powerful great lords in the realm, so really easy way to get a free dinner from one of the richest lords in the realm. The reason why he's called the Laughing Storm is because he starts laughing loudly at his opponents when they start fighting in the Joust and the Lists or in other matches. He's about as tall as Dunk, maybe like a little bit shorter when they're dancing. They're having a little dance-off. Dance-off, bro. Going full Star-Lord. But the idea is they're both meant to be huge. He's meant to give you a lot of vibes of Robert Baratheon when Robert was younger. Loves fighting, loves wars, loves partying, loves women, and just loves having fun. Terrible, terrible king, but an amazing friend to have. When he mentions the story from 4,000 years ago, that's to talk about how jousting was invented, but timeline-wise, that would put it around the Andal invasion, which is also relevant to this show, the Andal invasion, because they brought the custom, the Trial of Seven, with them. Trial by combat had already been a thing. Basically, the big event of this series, the big WTF moment, is the Trial of Seven in later episodes. Even though he is drunk as a skunk, he clocks Dunk in the middle of the crowd because he's so tall, he just sticks up like a weed. Calls him over and begins to befriend him, but notice he starts laughing at him, starts making fun of him because he's trying to suss him out and he's not sure why Dunk is here. He thinks he's like one of the other sycophantic lords who just wants something from Lionel because he's so powerful. And once he learns that Dunk is only there to get the free dinner, he really starts to open up, like they really start to become friends. Like, oh, this is so refreshing. You're not here to try and actually get anything out of me. We get that full-on Westerosi dance-off bros, and even though Raymond Fossaway is like technically the first friend that he made, because he hasn't actually made friends with Egg yet. I would normally call Egg the first friend that he made, but that doesn't really happen till the end of the episode. If Raymond is the first friend that he actually makes, like the first new friend, then Lionel Baratheon, one of the most powerful lords in the realm next to the Targaryen family, is his second friend, and a very good friend it seems like. Notice he gives him the story about Storm and the bravery, like riding into the storm. It's meant to be a mirror for Dunk's story, having to show bravery in the face of what happens to him in the next few episodes when shit really gets real. One of the other clear markers here that he really likes Dunk is that he lets him wear his crown of antlers. That is huge. Normally, that would get your head chopped off if you did something like that. He winds up spotting Manfred Dondarrion, also at the tent at the party, who treats him like crap and turns him away. We get another Sir Arlen flashback to the battle that he fought for Lord Dondarrion, and basically another faceful of how rotten some of the lords in Westeros can be. So Dunk is kind of meeting the entire spectrum of lords here, like the really good lords, the guys that are really cool, really nice, and the guys that are really terrible. And right after Manfred treats him like crap and kicks him on his way, he goes back to see that Egg has set up camp, and it's meant to be an example of someone, we'll say someone for right now because they haven't revealed who Egg actually is, being good to Dunk, doing something nice for him. You also notice some of the tricky dialogue that Egg uses. Egg is like a very, very precocious, very intelligent young boy. He says he's from King's Landing, but he is not from Flea Bottom, meaning that he's from another, richer part of King's Landing. And probably one of the other most important parts of the episode here is that Egg literally winds up being the one to give Dunk a proper name, Duncan, as in not just Dunk, because the whole reason why he's called Dunk is because when Sir Arlen found him in Flea Bottom when he was a little boy, he had no name. His mother hadn't even given him a name. Sir Arlen just started calling him Dunk, and that was it. Just Dunk. Nothing else. It wasn't short for anything else. His little name was just Dunk for most of his life until Egg meets him and says, "What about Duncan? Why don't you go by Duncan?" And he's like, yes, that actually sounds like a good name. I will call myself Duncan now.
Is it short for Duncan?
Yeah.
When Egg then says he knows all the good knights in the realm, he is correct. He's actually met them literally, like he knows them personally, and then Dunk allows him to squire for him, and they start what becomes one of the best friendships in Westerosi history. They basically become each other's ride or dies over their lifetime. When he promises not to beat him except when he deserves it, that's also a sly reference, like a wink back at what Sir Arlen did for him, like, you never beat me except when I deserved it. Then as they lie looking at the stars, they spot the falling star, which they take as a portent for good luck. It's not meant to be the same red comet like the falling star that Daenerys and all the other characters later in Game of Thrones wind up seeing, though. Completely different falling star. It'll wind up being important for Dunk's new coat of arms that he has to create, because even though he has Sir Arlen's shield, he can't use Sir Arlen's coat of arms. The only way you could do that is if he was the biological son or the biological relative of Sir Arlen. So the idea now is that once Sir Dunk is able to get someone to vouch for him, he has to actually create a coat of arms for himself. Everybody post all your reactions in the comments below, and because there were so many Easter eggs and references to the books and the show, if you spotted any during the episode that I didn't talk about during the video, just write them below in the comments. What I'll do is my episode 2 trailer video that should post pretty soon, and then my full episode 2 Easter eggs breakdown video will post next week after they release it. The really big reminder is that there's only going to be 6 episodes in Season 1. They've already confirmed 6 episodes in Season 2. It'll probably be the same for Season 3 and beyond that too. Everybody click here for that Episode 2 video. I'll update the link as soon as I post it. And click here for all my other Knight of the Seven Kingdoms episodes. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.